Us as humans, we have the best communication system of any animal on the planet, thanks to what I'm doing right now, talking. We have many different languages, dialects. We can communicate very easily. For reptiles, however, it's a lot more tricky. So today I want to act as your reptile translator so you can help identify what reptiles are trying to tell us, kind of how to read those signs and how to keep you and our animals safe. Let's get into it. So the first group of reptiles I wanted to talk to you all about was crocodilians. Crocodiles are pretty obvious in their communication because as they grow up into those big dominant males, they're trying to tell everybody what they're feeling. So when you see a crocodile out with his mouth open, teeth showing, he's putting that on display saying, hey, if you mess with me, this is what you have to deal with. And a lot of times they do that in the water when they're swimming around because they want to be big and look like that big dominant crocodile. This is called a territorial display. Also, when they're out on land, you can see them a lot more relaxed too. So a lot of times they open their mouth when they're out on land, not necessarily to show how big and mean they are, but to thermoregulate. Crocodiles, like all reptiles, are ectothermic, which is basically what you think of when you hear cold-blooded. So when crocodiles are out on land with that mouth open, they're usually thermoregulating. You can see their arms nice and relaxed, and they just look like a little couch potato on the ground. Often they'll hiss too, which is a sign that they're trying to show how tough they are. A lot of people may already know this, but when you come across a baby crocodilian, they're very vocal and they sound different to an adult crocodile. It kind of does that, near, that call. Alligators do it, crocodiles do it, and that's the baby crocodilian essentially singing out for its mom. So crocodilians are the most protective, incredible mothers. Some will even guard their young after they hatch. It is super amazing, but also if you come across a little crocodilian or an alligator in America doing that call, it's best to just kind of leave them alone because they're probably singing out for mom. And one thing I find really funny about crocodilians is that to seem really scary, like the scariest thing they can do is blow bubbles. And I think that's hilarious. So those are a couple signs to look out for. Inflating themselves in the water, hissing, opening their mouth, territorial display. Out on land when they're nice and relaxed, that means that they're thermoregulating and just enjoying the warm sun. So consider yourself lucky if you see one, and just be sure to admire it from a distance back. Stay 5 meters back from the water's edge, which is basically like 15, 20 feet back from the water's edge. Never go swimming in crocodile territory because they can swim at about the speed of a dolphin. So we love crocodiles, admire them from a distance, and just appreciate how cool it is. We have dinosaurs on the planet still today. Okay, so next up we have snakes. I'm joined here by beautiful George, the olive python. He's saying hello to everybody. And Hallie here has a Woma python. Now these two are non-venomous constrictors. They're part of the python family. So we're perfectly safe having them on us. Like I was saying earlier with crocodiles, they can't regulate their own body temperature like all reptiles. So these guys are actually loving our body heat on this cool day here at Australia Zoo. Now, I'd like you to take a minute and look at humans through the snake's perspective. These guys are slithering along the ground. They're only about that tall from where they're looking at us. So we appear absolutely massive. They also don't have ears, but they can sense vibration. So you can imagine this giant animal stomping over, sending out all these vibrations. We look absolutely terrifying to a snake. So most of the time when they're communicating with us, it's only because they're afraid of us. Simple as that. Ways they will tell us that is by rearing up kind of in that classic snake strike position. We call it the S position. They rear back and look like they're about to lunge out and strike. They really only do that when they're cornered or we look like we're trying to catch them or kill them, which you should never do to a snake. That's what makes them really scared, and it's perfectly understandable. You also have other snake species like the cobras who will hood up and actually get a couple feet off the ground, puff up their neck, look absolutely huge, and that's them trying to look big and scary. So first of all, you should consider yourself lucky that you've seen a snake, and then also you should keep your distance, especially if the snake is trying to tell you that it's afraid, giving off those signals. Now you'll also see these snakes are constantly flicking their tongue. That's them picking up scent particles in the air. They can smell with their tongue. They also, a lot of snake species have little pits along their head that can actually detect heat. So that's their prey items giving off heat, like small mammals and things. They can detect their body heat and know that that is food. They have beautiful eyes, they don't have ears, and when they only vocalize through hissing. So again, that's when they're trying to appear big and scary and they're afraid of us. They'll hiss to make themselves seem more intimidating. Next up, we have another member of the reptile family, which is our lizards. So this here is a blue-tongued lizard found native here in Australia. They get that name because they have a blue tongue, simple as that. Now, unique to these guys, they'll communicate by sticking out that tongue, and they'll open their mouth wide, and then they have this giant blue tongue that looks big and scary to anything that could potentially be trying to eat them. They'll hiss, they'll inflate their body to appear a lot bigger than they actually are. And again, just like snakes, that's them doing that only because they're essentially afraid of us. So if you see a blue tongue, consider yourself lucky. They're just going about their daily life, living in our gardens here in suburban Australia. They're pretty well adapted to living in our household gardens, which is super cool. Now, lizards as a whole, they have lots of different forms of communication. So your varanids, those big monitor lizards like your Komodo dragons or your lace monitors here in Australia, they can communicate a little bit more than, say, a blue tongue. They can puff up, they can even stand up on their hind legs, they can hiss, they can flick their tongue at you, they can make themselves seem really big, and they're a lot more movement oriented. So they can seem a little bit jerky in their movements, but that's essentially because they're following something moving and then they lock on to whatever's moving. You also have lizards like chameleons who communicate through their appearance. So whenever a chameleon is afraid or unsure of something, their colors become really drab. They try to make themselves seem as small as possible because they're constantly trying to camouflage with their surroundings. And then when they're happy again, they'll get those beautiful, vibrant colors, open up and get nice and comfortable. Next reptile I'm gonna translate for you guys is tortoises. These guys are adorable. A lot of times when they're scared, first of all, kind of like a turtle, they'll suck their head in and try to shelter in that shell that they have here and basically just hide. They can hiss a little bit too when they suck themselves into the shells, and I think that's honestly just to say, I'm scared or I'm annoyed with you. They're not going to be trying to chase you down or anything. You can see this is about top speed for Bruce, which is not very fast. I'm crawling around on my stomach around him, keeping up with him just fine. So if you ever come across a tortoise, they're not really going to try and hurt you, but you also just want to leave them alone. It can stress them out, messing with them, and a lot of people think they live inside of a shell. That's not true. The shell is actually part of their body. If you look at the skeleton of a tortoise, Bruce's spine would run right along the top of his shell, and he has nerve endings in his shell as well. So they can feel any scratches, anything touching them, they can feel every bit of that. You just want to leave them be, leave them happy. Obviously, if they're crossing a road, it's always nice to give them a helping hand to the other side if you feel safe enough to do so. But you also want to make sure you don't confuse tortoises with turtles. A lot of mistakes people make where you find tortoises is they think it's a turtle and they end up releasing the tortoise into the body of water. These guys aren't very good swimmers. They can bob a little bit, but they're not designed for living in the water. They got those club feet designed for walking on land. So they just carry on. They don't really do much to communicate. This is about as much as Bruce will communicate to us today. Now, turtles are very similar to tortoises. Tortoises found on land, designed for life on land. Turtles found in and around water, designed for life in the water. These guys can still come out on land. They have little claws that help them grip, but their feet are webbed, which helps them swim through the water. And if you have sea turtles, they obviously have flippers because they only live in the water unless they come out to nest. So that's kind of the difference. But the way they communicate is very similar to tortoises. Whenever they feel threatened or scared, they'll suck their head into their shell, or like this gorgeous little baby Irwin's turtle, he tucks his head in around the side. And that's a characteristic that a lot of turtles here in Australia have, is they got a longer neck. Instead of sucking into their shell, they kind of wrap it around the side. Same with tortoises, their shell's part of them. So they don't live in their shell is actually part of their skeletal structure. And they have nerve endings, so they can feel everything I'm doing on a shell, which is why you always want to be respectful of a turtle and its shell. But again, they don't know how to talk. They don't know how to communicate like us humans. So it's up to us to read the signs of reptiles. It's our responsibility to have a look at their body language, have a look and see if they're tense, if they're trying to tell us that they're afraid. It's our responsibility to give them space, keep some distance, and let them go about their daily lives. Because if you see a reptile out in the wild, it is super cool. Snake, lizard, turtle, tortoise, at the end of the day, if you see one, you can appreciate it from a distance, and you just give them space. Then they don't feel intimidated by us humans, and we can happily coexist with one another, because reptiles are super cool. They're my favorite family of animals, and it's awesome that we still have them on the planet, and they play an incredibly critical role in our ecosystems. Reptiles are awesome. Thanks, guys.
Watch out! Whoa, 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 whoa. Danger, danger, danger. I thought you clicked on that. Now, whatever you do, don't click on it. That's danger, remember? No clicking. No clicking.